Hey, welcome to Save America Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cartwright, in the free state of Florida, speaking to you from Tampa, Hillsborough County. And today we have another special guest. We have the Republican candidate for property appraiser, Hillsborough County, Mr. John Ballance. John Ballance, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, both of you, for having me.
Yeah, hey, we're really grateful to have you here today. We had a few questions. We understand you have a presentation. I see some of that on our screen right now. Why John Ballance for Hillsborough County property appraiser?
Well, I get asked that question quite a bit now, and what I will tell you, and I've been actually versed in not saying this, but the reality is I'm not a politician. I've been in the business world all of my life. I spent 30 plus years. This is actually identified in the right top corner of this presentation. It's really just a one-pager. But the reality is I spent the majority of my career in the business world working for consumer packaged goods organizations. I worked for companies like the Dial Corporation, Quaker Oats, Kimberly-Clark, and I did that through basically advancing from sales into category management, where we understand the numbers, the trends of the business, and then I ended up in the financial aspects of that particular business model. What I actually did was I learned about numbers and I learned about trends. When I lost my job in January 2020, which was not COVID related, I promised my family that I would continue to provide for my family. So I studied the history of the Federal Reserve. What I found through the Federal Reserve is how it's actually tied 100% to inflation, how it's tied to our economy, how it's tied to our taxes, and unfortunately, how it's tied to our politicians. So I learned quite a bit throughout 2020. And then when I actually did kind of stumble on some of the things, I started to see what I call trends, anomalies, and all the things that I was educated on throughout my career, I saw now happening in our financial markets and how it tied directly to our politicians. So I decided after 2021, when I got involved with the Hillsborough Executive Committee, I've seen how they weren't really finding good candidates. And when this opportunity became available and I saw nobody was stepping up to do the property appraiser role, I felt my background, my understanding of markets, trends, and the Federal Reserve really positioned me well to understand how it's impacting you, the taxpayer, specifically through property appraisers.
Well, let me ask a little bit more about Mr. John Ballance. Where are you from? How long have you lived here in Hillsborough County?
I've lived in Hillsborough County since December of 2006. As I mentioned, working in consumer packaged goods, I have moved 10 different times throughout my career. I've lived no longer than 4 years anywhere that I've ever moved. My final move brought me here. It honestly brought me here in 2006. I used adjustable rate mortgages everywhere I went. When we came here in 06, and you have to understand, 2006, I told my wife something was wrong with the markets. Something was wrong with the housing market. This is the first time I ever bought a 30-year fixed and put 40% down on my home. I watched here in Fishhawk, 60% of my neighbors go belly up. I foresaw that market collapse, and I'm looking at similar things now, and our government's tied directly to it.
So 18 years a Hillsborough County resident and a homeowner.
For 18 years, yes.
18 years, Hillsborough County resident and a homeowner.
Yep, I've been married for 31 years to my wife. I have a son and a daughter. My son is 26. He is now fully embraced in the business community. I have a daughter who is now 24. She also is fully embraced in the business community. Both of them graduated. My son from USF, my daughter from the University of Florida, and they're both firmly on their feet with what my wife and I like to brag ourselves on is we got lucky, they listened to us, and now they're being very conservative Republicans as well.
And anything you would like to offer? I heard just some description in a lot of the other education. Anything formally you would like to add as far as your bachelor's and or master's? Or is that a time out? I don't know. Maybe I misstepped.
No, you know what? You can play this. I get a kick out of it. I'll let you do this. I get a kick out of it. My daughter went to the University of Florida, and she constantly bragged about the University of Florida is a #5 school in the country. So I had her look up my school. I went to Southeast Missouri State in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. She looked it up. It's ranked 186. I simply looked at her and said, you know what? Show me what you do after you get out of school. And they know what we've done or what I've done after I got out of school. So they get the message.
Well, Southeast Missouri State sounds kind of familiar. You and I are going to have a lot to talk about more because I'm familiar with that part of the country. So how about the Democrats' agenda? What's going on there? I see you have some talking points. Please tell us about that.
Well, the interesting thing about the Democratic agenda is as I watched this, and I've been a Republican all my life, when I first joined the Hillsborough Executive Club, I watched what the Democrats were doing. They stuck to talking points. They would almost, and we've now kind of seen it, they would send out an email once a week and they'd have 5 bullet points and everybody would say the same thing. They knew how to get their message across. Frankly, the Democrats are better marketers than the Republicans. I took it to the HREC head at the time and said, why don't the Republicans do that? And he said to me, because we're Republicans, you can't control the way we think. We're more free thinkers. At first, I was frustrated, but the reality is what I've now seen is the Democratic agenda, as I've mentioned up here, they simply do as they're told. They do not deviate. So when they're told this is the talking points, they all stay on topic. They're very good at that, but it doesn't allow for any deviation to that. What I would also tell you is the unfortunate part, what I see, and I see it more at the macro level, but I have to understand that it's happening across the entire spectrum of the Democratic Party. What we see is at the national level, there's a lot of things that are going on, and we know people are saying things that we're going to support this, we're going to support this, we're going to support this. Yet we know they probably don't support it. But what I see the Democratic Party do is they're holding something over the majority of their candidates and their representatives to where when it's their turn, they have to follow through, whether they want to or not. When they get their number called, they will do what they need to do to stay in the party. That's what scares me the most. The next thing is, as we've watched the Republican Party of the past, we've always seen that they were pro-war, they were pro-big business. They've really never been pro-big government, but what we're seeing today is a complete reversal in the Democratic world, that they're more pro-war and pro-business than the Republican Party ever was. You throw that on top of that with big government, and you've got where we are today, which is not good. And the biggest call out that I have on this agenda is that everybody that's aligned with the Democratic Party, whether they're aware of it or not, is going to have their number called. And when it's called, they will force you to speak their agenda.
Anything else about pro-war, big business, big government?
I mean, outside of what everybody sees right now, you can see that the Democratic Party is trying to start a war. Trump was in office, nothing happened. He had the Abraham Accords. Everything was good. And the minute they were forcing him out, all of a sudden, here comes all of these anomalies. Here comes all of these problems. And if you really watch what's happened over the last 6.5 to 8 years, you can see everything that they're telling us that Trump was going to do, the Democrats have actually done. And if we can't see that that's an agenda, I don't know what it is.
So the macro and the micro economy, I see that you wanted to address that. What is this about?
Well, when I look at this, and it kind of goes back to my career, we would always start out in the numbers. We would dig into it. We would look at it at a macro level, and we started seeing issues. Then we would delve into the micro level to see where there were similarities, where there were anomalies, and where there were things that actually just simply didn't match. Because I've actually brought my career up that way, thinking that way, I've always thought that way, is that I'm taking a macro perspective in this role. And I see what our government is doing. And I think a lot of people do. Our government at the macro level, at the national level, the Biden regime, their government corruption is beyond belief. Then you look at the illegal immigration. What is illegal immigration really doing? Where is it being impactful? How is it coming down here? The inflation and how it ties back to the Federal Reserve. The whole thing is actually coordinated. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. This thing is all repeating itself. And that's where most people forget. And that's why they're trying to, on the Democratic agenda, how they're trying to get you to focus not on so much the past, they're trying to remove our history. The reality is, if we go back in history, it's all there. It shows us exactly what they're doing. And then the last thing is this taxation without representation, which is a cliche, I will certainly say, but I think what we're seeing right now with the fact that FEMA has now issued and said that they will run out of money before our hurricane season is over because they've given it to the illegal aliens that are coming into this country. How can that be any worse as far as a taxation without representation? And then I've got a couple of slides here, which our media and our government tells us the economy is doing great. Jobs are great. What I've got here is 4 particular slides. Most of it is identified to where these jobs are coming from. And up in the top left corner, you can see that where it says native jobs, native born job trends. The blue line are the jobs that they're reporting. The brown line are native born jobs. You can see right there that ever since, and that big dip, by the way, is COVID, but you can see that we have never recovered. So United States citizens in the United States here have not recovered. They are flat. Every one of these new jobs is going to an illegal alien, and they don't have to pay taxes. The government and the businesses don't have to actually pay them the minimum wage. There's a lot of games that are being played. If you move over to the next slide on the top where it says part-time versus full-time, what they're saying is people are going to work and they're counting jobs. They are not counting full-time versus part-time. What that basically means, Mike, is that you could have 3 jobs to support your family and it goes in as 3 jobs, even though Mike is working on behalf of his family where he had it with 1 job before. That's the reality that's behind the equation. Then when you go down to the left, the lower left, as I talked about the macro scenario, the Democratic agenda, pardon me, big business, big government, you can see right here, the chart on the left lower actually identifies that top large trend. I believe that is, that's healthcare. So we know what's going on with our healthcare industry. Our government is tying that all into Obamacare. The next one is government, the light blue bar. The slide after that is going to be entertainment and leisure. And when you understand entertainment and leisure, that's where a lot of these illegals are actually going to work because they're working and cleaning dishes. And they always say, this is an area where we don't want those jobs. And as you continue to come down that list, every one of these is sponsoring our government growth. And if you actually take government out of the equation, the last probably 1.5 to 2 years, we've had a -8 GDP. They don't want to tell you that. And then the far right bottom slide is simply what it's really happening. You can see the foreign-born workers are actually getting it. The native-born workers are not getting that money. This is a true transformation of wealth. That is what the goal is. And if you understand the Hispanic community, you understand the Black community, they're being impacted much more so than somebody that's in a middle management or a white-collar job or anything else. The people at this level, and even the impoverished white people, they are actually being driven out of work. So this agenda is not helping the people in the lower economic scale of our environment.
I saw that back at that third slide, there was construction and professional and business services and transportation and warehousing. So that's an interesting looking chart.
Well, and when we get to the 4th quadrant, I can shed a little light about those very points and what's happening in Hillsborough County. So excellent transition. If you really want to talk about what I'm trying to accomplish now with all of this, I look at this and I'm learning every day. I've taken my business role. I've taken my understanding of interpreting. I've worked in sales all my life. I've learned how to ask the right questions to get the right information so I can actually meet the needs of who I'm speaking to. The big picture in this one is when you look at the impact of the economy and the taxes, if you go back to the Democratic agenda and you go back to the Federal Reserve, everything's tied together. They want our economy to fall apart. They need inflation so they can then drive more laws and regulation to actually drive up your taxes so they can continue to do what they want. When you look at the illegal immigration, the impact that that is actually having on our housing market, which most people don't equate to. We hear a lot in the buzzword. Again, the Democrats are better marketers than the Republicans are, but the buzzword is affordable housing. Well, the reason we don't have affordable housing is because they say there's a housing shortage. When you have all these illegal aliens coming across our border, we're having to put them up somewhere. Our government is subsidizing housing and hotels today for all those illegal immigrants that actually come into our society, which is actually putting a crimp in our ability to find affordable housing. The fact that it's subsidized and the fact that there's more coming across the border than we actually have here, we're not prepared for the influx of that. That has a direct correlation to now your property taxes. So when all these people come across the border and we have to find a place for them to live, whether it's renting, whether it's home ownership, whatever it may be, duplexes, condos, you name it, we're building these things and it's driving our costs through the roof. So the United States citizen, and here in Hillsborough, we're paying for that because I watched the incumbent at a meeting stand up in front of everybody, and it's his economic summit that he has every year. He's had 3 of them, and it's the position of the market or something like that. The long and the short was he stood up in front of a room of 400 people, and he spoke to the specifics that the economy is not good nationwide, but because everybody wants to move to Tampa, we're all doing really well. Well, because we're doing so well, it's driving our housing prices up, it's driving our property taxes up, and he is simply saying, I am the facilitator of that. I am a constitutional position, and I get that, I do understand that, but he says as a constitutional position, I have to follow the laws of the state legislatures, I have to follow the laws of the county commissioners, and frankly, to a degree, I have to follow what the school boards put in front of me. So I can't push back. The reality is he, based on the Democratic agenda, is simply a facilitator of what comes his way. I will be a fighter for what comes our way. I am going to stand up for the constituents, and I will push back on things that I feel are unconstitutional. I had an opportunity to actually meet with an individual that ran for this office in 2016. He was a professional developer. He a professional appraiser. He spent 8 years at the University of Florida educating, and he was actually a professor there talking about appraisals and how the business model works. He's a professional. He's well accredited in the commercial real estate space. He gave me 45 minutes. We had a great conversation. In the beginning, he wanted to know, who am I and why am I running? Just like you've done here. And he was trying to determine whether I was qualified. And based on the conversation that he and I had, similar to what we're talking about here, at the end of our conversation, he was simply giving me, he said, good luck. You need to get a good constitutional lawyer to back you because the establishment will come after you hard. So that is my goal, is to get the right people in the office, to get the right people to fight for the taxes, fight them for what is right, and push back on our current administration, whether they're Republican or Democrat, because what I see today is that we as a party are just watching the Democrats do this. And what I am actually seeing probably more so is that the developers here in Hillsborough County are coming out the winners. They're backing all of our candidates. They're backing all of the people that are currently in the administration, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And I'm watching the developers win this game. And the developers is where the money is. And that's where the taxing is. And they've got loopholes and everything else established in the government that I'm going to unearth and make a platform to make sure that the constituents understand what's going on. I will push back on both parties when I get into office, and I will make sure that they either move. If they do not move on those issues, I will take a public forum to bring it out so the constituents will understand who's working for them and who's not, so we can vote accordingly in the months and years to come.
Great presentation. I really like the images. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that you would like to add in closing?
The only thing I'd like to add in closing is obviously get the message out. I'm self-funding this. I decided to do this on my own. I've watched us move poor candidates forward. Nobody was running for this role, so I decided to step up at the last minute. I have a scan code bar there that you can scan in to go directly to my website. You can donate, you can do whatever you'd like, you can ask questions. I'm there for you, but we need to get the word of mouth because name recognition unfortunately drives a lot of tickets. I am the Republican on the ballot. I will be listed before the incumbent because it's just how it works alphabetically. My name's got a great cliche. Understand that what I'm going to do is bring a balanced approach to property appraisers, not a biased approach, which I actually see is happening today.
And that website, besides the code that you mentioned, Balance for propertyappraiser.com. We want to thank you for joining the Save America podcast with Mike Cartwright and Tim Horton, your host. Excellent. You got our vote. General election, November 5th. John Ballance for Hillsborough County Property Appraiser. Thank you, John. God bless America.
Thank you both, Mike and Tim, for bringing me the opportunity, and God bless America. Absolutely. We're doing this for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.